Keith here. All right, so I wanted to do a run through of the updates in xLights between 2018.13 and 2018.16. So a whole bunch of things to get through, so let's get going. I'm going to start with add vendor render caching to eliminate the need to continually shrink large videos. So we've had a problem for a while where if you've got a large video and you drop it onto a matrix, it renders quite slowly. And the reason it renders quite slowly is because xLights has got to take that big video and compress it all the way down to be whatever the size of your video model is. So let me grab a video and drop it onto my matrix here and put my video on there. This is a pretty small video, so you don't notice it so much. So the video's there and it's all looking good and everything else. But what's now happening behind the scenes is that xLights here, and this is my show folder, xLights here has gone and created this directory called the render cache, the video render cache. And it's created a couple of files here that are pretty small in the scheme of things. I mean, this video file, if I bring up its properties, it was about 16 megabytes. And you can see, so it was about 16 megabytes and now it's about 1 megabyte. In fact, you can see that there are two of them. And the reason there are two of them is because I dropped the video effect and it rendered it for a short period of time. And then I stretched the video out. And when I stretched the video out, of course, the video looked different because the properties were now different. And so it had to go back and re-render it again. And if I come down here to the video again and I resize it again and I go back to that folder, now there's 3 files, okay? And so this is a little bit of a downside of what it's doing here. It keeps on recreating these files every time you tinker with the video effect. But the power of it is when you click render all, it renders in almost no time at all. And that will be true even if your video files are very large. Because what it's doing is it's basically rendering it down to the size of your model and then saving that data into this file here. And then when it comes time to render all, it looks at these files, sees if there's any here that match exactly how the effect is set up. If there is, it grabs the data out of here and it renders really quickly because it doesn't have to read that large video and process it again. Now the downside of this, of course, if you tinker around with these videos a lot, is your folder's going to get filled up with these and it's going to take a bit of space on your disk. At any time you want, you can come in here and delete these files. Okay, xLights is not going to care. The next time I click on the effect, which will cause it to render, it will go off and it will re-render that file. And it will find, actually I'll do the render all. Why is it not creating? Not sure why that didn't go back and recreate the file. It could be because it's got it in memory right now. Let's tinker with it again. And there's the file created. All right, so you can delete them at any time. Do not worry, your xLights will not care about it. These files are entirely there to improve performance if you're building sequences containing video, and they can be deleted at any time. So it's just a performance improvement. All right, next change, white channel support to the DMX model. So if you grab a DMX model up here and draw it, we've always had the red, the green and the blue channel. We now also have a white channel. So if you've got a prop that happens to have an independent white channel, you can now set that channel number in here and xLights will drive that white channel. And basically it will do the way we always do RGBW. If the R, the G and the B are all exactly the same, then we turn the white channel on. If any of the R, G and B channels are slightly different, then we turn on the RGB channels and we turn the white channel off. So that's how it will work. But for those people that have a white element in their prop, you can now take advantage of it. The next one is synchronizing shape effects. So if I go back to my sequencer, I've only got the one matrix. Let me go and create a second matrix here so that you can actually see this in action. Actually don't create that sequence. That was 40 by 50. Let me make that also 40 by 50 so that they're comparable. I want you to be able to see what this does. Do not like that. All right. Oh, it's close enough. All right. So we'll go and create our sequence. So creating a shape effect, which is this one here, and dropping it onto our second matrix and dropping it onto our first matrix. You would think that everything would be fairly similar on the two, but you can see that they're pretty much all over the place. They're not consistent. Let's get rid of the random location and set the count back to 1. Let's do the same on this one. Right, you can see they're not quite in time. They're in slightly different times. And the reason for that is because it actually starts at a random point. And so there is now this, there's this, where did it go? Hang on, I need to make this bigger. Okay, so now there's this random initial shape sizes. So if you get rid of that randomness, and on both of them you get rid of that randomness, you'll find that there's two shape effects because they're the same duration, the same start time, everything on them looks identical. So an extra checkbox just to give you that ability. CSV format for Gladiator effect. Okay, so what this is, and I'm not sure how often people would use it, but in some circumstances, in this case, someone was trying to control some motors using xLights, and they wanted really precise control, and they wanted a file format that would let them do that. And so what I said to them was, well, what if you were to go into Excel? And it doesn't have to be Excel, you can use a text editor for this. Just Excel makes it a little bit easier to do. And what if I was to tell you that every row in Excel was a time period, and you can set a value in this, and each column represents a channel. So this is going to control for 10 time periods. This is going to control a particular prop, setting channel 1 and 2 to start it on and then turn it off. Channel 3 is going to start it off and turn on, and then channel 4 is going to go to 255. Now, of course, you can use any value in here between 0 and 255. I just happen to have chosen, let's make that 127, make it clearer. And what we do is we save that file. We're going to throw it onto my desktop into the folder that I happen to be working in at the moment, which is this one here. And we're going to save it as a CSV file. This one here, book 1, who cares? Name's not important. And now what we're going to do, yes, I do want to keep the format. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to come over to our single line, to our strand, and I've expanded it out so you can see it work. And we're going to grab the Gladiator effect, which is this one here. And we're going to drop that. I'm going to drop it on the strand level. I don't think it matters. We're going to come down here. We're going to choose a file. In this case, we're going to choose CSV files. So we're going to choose our CSV file. And you can see what it's done is it's brought that data in exactly as we expected. So as we said, channel 1 and 2 would be on for a period and then they would turn off, and that's exactly what they've done. Channel 3 would be off and then it would turn half on, and you can see that it's a grey colour here, which is it being half on, and then channel 4 would be on for the duration. Not only that, you can take advantage of things like the loop, so now it's just looping around for those 10 frames and repeating it, or you can slow and accelerate it, and what that does is it stretches that data out over duration of the effect. And so you can come up here and shorten it back in and it will re-render it. So now using a CSV file, you can actually manually program your channel data and then use the now slightly misnamed Gladiator effect to bring that data in and play it on a particular model. Okay, next one, adding search to the sequences and lyrics download. So in the tools, we added a little while ago the sequences and lyrics download. Now, the downside of the sequences and lyrics download is that it's become crazy big. There are so many things in here. And so now there is a field down here I can type. And so I can type in can and do a search. Didn't find anything. I will just search for can. Okay, so there it is. It's found can't stop the feeling. And if you keep searching, it will keep on jumping through, finding each one that has can inside it. So a very quick way to quickly search through. If I want, I don't know, the word white, 6 white boomers, white Christmas, white winter, white Christmas, and so forth. So just a quick way to search through what has already become quite a crazy list because of the xLights Singing Faces project, putting a whole bunch of stuff in there. So that's that one. Windows check for a newer version. Now, by now, hopefully you've all stumbled across this, and there was a slight quirk in .15 which meant that it took you to a page that had a long list of all of the new versions. But now when you fire up a new version, I can't really demo it here because I'm already running the latest version, it actually reaches out to our website in the Windows version. It's been doing this in the OS X and the Linux version for some time, and it will see if there's a newer version of xLights available. If there is, it will prompt you to download it and install it, so you don't have to watch the forums to make sure that you get notification when xLights is updated. You can, through that process, choose to ignore the version and it will not prompt you until another version comes along. Add, select, copy and paste all effects on a model. So what does this mean? So basically, I've reorganized some of the right-click menus here. So there's now this model and row. So you've always been able to say select all the effects on a row, or copy all the effects on a row, or even delete all the effects on a row, and that's fine. But when you've had multiple layers, and you've had multiple effects going on, I don't know, and you wanted to copy and paste that. So if I wanted to go to model, I can now copy all the effects on a model. We'll come down here and paste them. I can also just select all the effects on a model, and you can also delete them as well, delete the effects on a model. So yeah, so that's slightly been reorganized, and there are some additional capabilities in there. So I don't know about you, but if you're importing something like a superstar file that creates a whole bunch of effects on a model and you don't quite like how it looks, you want to go back and redo it, this becomes a very quick way to just come in and just go to the model, delete all the effects, clears all the effects out of your model, you can go back and redo the import. So that's that one. Add -O command line option to turn on output to lights when xLights starts. So I don't know if people realize this. Hang on, I'll just get this set up. But xLights actually has a bunch of command line options. So if I go here and type xLights -? What actually happens is xLights pops up this here, which says, hey, there's a whole bunch of options that you can use. Most of them you would very rarely use, but you can change the show folder when xLights starts up and specify that. Or you can do the /W, which erases all of your settings and it restores xLights back to a pristine first time ever install state. But there's now this -O option. So if I go and type xLights -O, what's going to happen is it's going to start up xLights, which is starting up on my other screen. I'll move it over in a second. And if you look, the output to lights icon is now on. So this allows you to start xLights and have it immediately outputting to lights. And obviously it's going to be sending out zeros at this point, but yeah, that's what the -O option now does. But there's a whole bunch of other options in there that you might want to use. Add the ability to time shift value curves. Interestingly, probably the best way to show this is to actually go grab that effect that Kevin posted. But for the moment, let's not. Let's just grab, I don't know, something simple. Let's grab a spiral. I always like the way spirals looks. And let's grab the spiral wraps value curve. And let's say I go and create a fairly complicated one. So I've chosen a preset. There's now this time offset. And this time offset up here lets you just move the curve around. And this works really well, even if it's a custom. So if I take that and turn it into a custom and start, when you do this, the time offset's got to be 0, otherwise it's not editable. That's a trick for young players. So yeah, so here's what I'm doing. So what I'm doing here is I'm just dragging these things around. And everything else. And now I can come down here and I can move that time offset around. So why would you want to do that? Well, as Kevin showed in his effect, if you go and have a look at how he set his effect up, sometimes when you create a fairly complicated custom value curve, you then want to use it over and over again, but you just want to offset it slightly, which he did with each of the stars as they went round his borders. And so the time offset lets you reuse the same value curve over and over again, and just time shift it along a little bit. Now notice it wraps around. So whatever ends over here goes back to the beginning here. So it doesn't always make sense. So if I was to come back here and I was to do a ramp, the time offset doesn't make a lot of sense because you get this jump in the middle, and that's just the nature of the way this works. But anyway, hopefully you may find some interesting things to do with that. The next one is around submodels. So we need to go back to our layout and let's go and create some submodels. Now, I don't remember, I think I went through this. This is our new submodel dialog. It's kind of nice. It lets you rename things and everything else. But let's go and create a whole bunch of submodels. Let's do a generate because it's really easy to do. Okay, so there's 4 submodels. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can, of course, change the name of them. That's interesting. Not sure why that's shows that it should be draggable, but it's not. Anyway, you can rename the submodel here. So if I click on this and call this, I don't know, Fred, it renames the submodel. So you can now rename submodels. You can also reorder them. So if you want Fred to be at the bottom, you can bring Fred down to the bottom, put him back at the top, or rename him back to submodel 1. Submodel -1. Cancel. All right. Click OK. So now we've got 5 submodels in there. Now what I want to do is I want to create a group as well. Doesn't really matter what I call it. And I'm just going to take these first. Oh, actually, there's no point putting. I'm going to grab the DMX model, 3 of the submodels and the single line, and I'm going to put it into the group. Now, what I've done is, I'll create a new sequence. What I've done here is normally when you go into the matrix, you can see the submodels here, and it's obvious what they belong to because they belong to the matrix. The problem came when you had a group, and now these submodels are in there, but if there were multiple submodel 1s on different matrices and the like, it would all get very confusing. And so now it actually shows you the name of the model that that submodel belongs to try and make it a little less confusing. Okay, let's go and add a bunch of layers. For a while now, you've been able to come into here and collapse all models, which does that. The only problem was that when you had a group like this, actually it's probably best to show it here. So if I collapse all models, it still leaves those layers open. So now there's a collapse all layers as well, which collapses those all up and compresses everything up. It'll also do timing tracks as well, as I think if you've got, if I did a breakdown and I had multiple layers there, it would collapse those as well. Shifting effects. So for a while now, in fact, I think Gil added some time ago, the ability to shift all of your effects. So if you wanted to shift all of these things back 1 second, you'd come up to edit, you'd say shift effects, you'd say -1000 milliseconds, and all the effects would shift over to the left. But what happens if you actually only wanted to shift, say, these two effects, and you wanted to shift them to the right? Well, obviously you couldn't use the shift all effects because this would shift. And that doesn't seem like a big deal. There's only a couple of them. I can drag and drop them, but I may have hundreds of effects here. So if you just wanted to shift those two effects, you can now come up and choose shift selected effects. And I can say here, I want to shift those things 1 second to the right. And because they're the two I had selected, it will shift those two across. So you can take advantage of things like selecting all the effects on a model, and then say, I'll just shift all the effects across for that model, for instance, in a very simple and easy way. So that's that one. Fix LMS CCR imports not working correctly. Okay, so I'm going to jump back here and I'm going to change my show folder. I think this is Matt's folder. Does it look like Matt's folder? Maybe it's this one. Okay, yeah, that looks like his folder. All right, so here's his show here. So let's go in and create a quick sequence. And let's do an import effects from his LMS files. I don't think it really matters which one. And because it's LMS, we wait a little while because those files are huge. And there it comes up. Okay, so there's a couple of things here. Now, he actually has in this file his tree. And so you can see DMX, thousands and thousands of channels. And somewhere in here he has his tree, 12 ribbon tree. There's his 12 ribbon tree. So we've had this for a while, this map CCR strand. Looks like his tree is not really yet, but it doesn't matter. So what I want to do is I want to map these. Let's imagine these are CCR strings. I want to map them in. So we never really, it was meant to, in theory was that when you went into this CCR mapping mode, you could just map at the strand level. And that now works. And did you know if you've sort of selected this and you come over here, you can just punch the enter key and it will actually map each thing across as it goes. And so what this will do is when I map that, oh yeah, I don't care about that. And then if I come in here and I find the tree, oops, it's off with the pixies. Could be, yeah, it just takes a while. Where's our 12 ribbon tree? And I go, you can see that it's brought all the effects in on all the nodes on that strand. And they're not identical. They're actually slightly different, right? You can see how these things start together and get further apart over here. So it's actually mapped each one of those nodes individually onto those 4 strands and brought the data in. So rather than having to map each node, you can map the CCRs at the strand level and bring the whole strand in one piece. So that's that. Let's go and let's do the next one, which is the pixel editor. So the Law pixel editor is actually derived from an earlier version of xLights. It was obviously enhanced by Matt over at Law. But I've been helping a guy who wants to bring his pixel show across from Law, and of course the LMS stuff. It kind of works. Now I've got the strand stuff fixing, although it creates really big files, but his pixel editor stuff is a bit harder to bring across. And so we've now built a import for the Law pixel editor files. And so I can come into here. Now, I do give you a warning. This is experimental, so I kind of need feedback from people to help me work out why things aren't working. So if it doesn't do a good job, I need to know, which effect, which setting had to fine tune, what it was when it was converted, what it and what you changed it to make it look right again, so that I can fine tune the conversion code. And so basically it looks the same, except here I've got a whole bunch of stuff from the pixel editor. I'm going to load the mapping up because I've already mapped this before. And so this has all been mapped in. These ones don't exist. That's actually Candy Cane 1. I think that's Candy Cane 2, but it doesn't really matter. Good enough. And I click OK. And I don't bring it. And you can see that it actually brings the pixel editor in as effects and tries to do the best possible job that it can, getting all of those effect settings right. Now, they don't all map perfectly. There has been changes made both on our side and on the Law side. So it's very difficult to map everything perfectly. Some of the effects, though, that I have done look pretty good. I think, things like butterfly and bars and color wash and spirals, I think all come across reasonably well. But yeah, trying to make it easier for those guys coming across from the pixel editor world. Then Scott did some stuff with the submodels. So I'm going to change again back to my previous folder, which was this one. Yeah, discard those changes. We'll go to layout, and if you remember rightly, I built a whole bunch of submodels on this matrix. Well, what happens if I want those submodels on this matrix? Now, I could go and do them all again. It was pretty easy. I just generated them. But what happens if I didn't want to? Well, one of the things that Scott now lets you do is he has these things down here. If I can fix that up, you'd be able to see it. But here I can import it from a model. So I can say, go to the matrix model and bring across all of the submodels from that model onto this model as well. And now those things exist. So that's kind of cool, right? So if you create all your models, you go on submodel 1, and then you realize you need to do the same thing to all the others. You either have to go back, delete everything and recreate them, or now you can go in and just grab the submodels from another effect. You can also bring it in from an X model file as well. So yeah, that's kind of cool. Thanks, Scott. The Vixen FSCQ file support. Oh, actually, no, we'll talk about that in a minute when we get to X schedule. So the final thing is the new effect, which I'm sure you've all noticed by now, and that's the warp effect. One of the things that we introduced a few releases back was this whole canvas mode and the ability to do some funky things with that. It created a new way of rendering stuff. But one of the reasons why I wanted to introduce canvas was because I wanted the ability to take an effect and distort the effect. And that's what the warp effect does, that Kevin has so nicely written for us, sorry. So let's go and give our matrix some layers. And let's drop the butterfly effect on it. I'll get some sparkles. How do we get sparkles? All right, so it looks good. And let's grab the warp effect. Now, there's a couple of things you'll notice about the warp effect. The first thing with the warp effect is you'll notice that it automatically turns the canvas mode on. And the second thing you'll notice is that it's distorted the effect underneath. Interestingly, when you bring the effect over to here where there's nothing, it does absolutely nothing. So this effect actually does not display anything at all. It has to sit above another effect. In this case, it's obviously sitting above a butterfly, and you can see how it's distorting the butterfly underneath it. There are a whole bunch of settings that go with this effect. If I drag this over here, there's also some problems. I don't know why this is, but someone was pointing out that the centering of it doesn't quite work right when it's on 50. That's a bug. We'll have to fix that. And so you can see here, this is set on water drops, and you've got multiple water drops going into a point, and you're getting the wavelets moving out and distorting the effect. But there's a whole bunch of these. There's a dissolve that dissolves in. I think there's also, oh, that's right. Yep, you can also dissolve it out. Dissolve in. Now, not all of these things work together. Kevin is working on getting this panel so that the panel works a little smarter and disables options that don't go together. The circle reveal is a kind of nice blended circle reveal on your model. It's kind of like the old transition stuff that we used to do, except it gives you this really nice blend. So I really quite like that. I'm not sure why that's an out. It looks like an in to me, but there you go. I'm sure there's a logic to that. Banded swirl, this is kind of cool, right? It kind of twists and distorts it. A ripple, it puts a ripple into the effect. And a single water drop. So this puts one water drop in for the duration of the effect. This looks pretty good on things like images and movies and the like. And you could play with a whole bunch of settings here. I know, like I said, they don't all work together. I think if you've got water drops, the frequency matters. You can see the number of things has gone up dramatically, and I reduce it down to here. Oh no, maybe it's the speed that's causing that. Oh, that's kind of weird, isn't it? There's some really interesting distortions that are going on here, and it's all down to this canvas mode, right? If you turn the canvas mode off, it does nothing. When you turn it on, it's able to distort the effects underneath. And you can put any effect you like underneath, you know, put a bars effect, that's cool. He's also built value curves onto to some of these things. Hopefully we might be able to get some value curves on some others. I don't know. It depends on the algorithms underneath whether that's even possible. But yeah, I think it provides an interesting dimension onto a whole bunch of other effects. Oh, see, I don't know any other way that you could do that. That's kind of weird. Some circles. Whoa. Yeah, kind of like that. All right, so that's the warp effect. I'm sure you're gonna have a whole bunch of fun. I think that there's a whole bunch of stuff that Kevin could do with this. There's a whole bunch of other types of distortions that we could add, which would be really interesting. So it's going to end up being like VU meter. It's going to have about 1 billion modes with it. A bunch of different things that you can do. All right, let's go on. Now, I'm not going to talk about X-fade or crossfade. I've made a separate video on that because it really is a subject unto itself. Let's talk very quickly about the changes to X-schedule. Couple of things to cover here. One, I think this... Yep, so this here is a Jukebox playlist item. Now that has existed in a couple of versions. You should definitely upgrade to 16 because this is a little bit improved. In the xFade video, we talked about the fact that xLights can now have a control port that's set up, an A or a B, because you can run 2 copies of xLights and they control them independently. So here I've set it up to be A. I'm going to quickly set up a Jukebox item. I'm going to I'm going to set this up to be the matrix layer 3, so forth. Okay, so when I click on button 1, it's going to show the single line. So turn that off. And then over here, you can see that this playlist item has been set up to trigger via port A, which this xLights is listening to. It's going to press button 1 when I play it. So if I come here and I play this playlist item, xLights plays that particular effect. And obviously, if you had xLights set up outputting to the lights, you can see how you could schedule the jukebox. Now, of course, scheduling that based on event might be kind of interesting. You can set up all your things in xLights and play them. I don't know. I'm sure someone somewhere will find something useful to do with it. Next one. So there's a couple of changes to the schedule here. By default, when you set up a new schedule, it fires once at whatever the start time is, but you can now select to say, actually, I want this schedule to play every 30 minutes. So every 30 minutes after the start of the sequence, I think it is, or maybe it's at the top of the hour and the bottom of the hour, I think, it will go in and it will play this particular sequence. I think it must be every 30 minutes after the start time. I have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's how it would work. And so, yeah, so if you want to have your show, if you're one of these people that likes to schedule your show during the evening rather than just have it run in a perpetual loop, and so you've been creating multiple schedules to do that, this now lets you set up one schedule and play it multiple times. You can also now come in on the on time and type in sunset. And if you want to turn it off at sunrise, you can type in sunrise, and they are now valid on and off times. Now, in order to use that, oh, that's not good. It's not meant to do that. Oh, I have to look at that one. So in order to use that, one of the things that you do need to do is you need to come up to your options and you need to set your location. That's why I hadn't set my location. So these are actually sorted in time zone order. So Sydney's right down near the end. So yeah, so now if I type in sunset and sunrise, click OK, it knows, because the sun's now gone down, it knows that that's due to play. So yeah, so it would be easier. Go down to this one and say sunset. Now remember, sunset's not when it gets dark. Sunset's when the sun goes down. And you can see, so it's 8:06. 8:06 p.m. is when it gets, the sun goes down on Christmas Eve this year. So yeah, so rather than have a static time every time. So this is kind of useful if you want to use this for, I don't know, architectural lighting, and obviously you want it to come on at sundown every night. And obviously you want to turn it on much earlier in winter than you do in summer when the sun goes down later. So that's what that's there for. All right, file read option to the text playlist item in xschedule. So yeah, so this was something Scott added. Yeah, Scott added this. So if I add a text playlist item in here, what he's done is, normally there was just normal and countdown. Now there's a file read, and you can type in here the name, the path and file name of a file, and the text effect will read the data out of that file, and that's what it will display. And you just use this down here. You would say %file_data, like that. And you could say, you can put stuff before it and stuff after it, but it will read the data out of that file and place it there. So you can have another program doing something else that writes data into that file. And whenever this text playlist item comes up, it's going to read the file and display whatever happens to be in there. So maybe you've got another program that reads text messages of something and writes them into this file so that they can get displayed. It's just another way of integrating xschedule with other applications. That's kind of cool. Thanks, Scott. And finally, so the last one I can't really show you, but it turns out that there's a slight difference between the headers that Vixen writes out in the FSCQ file and what xLights writes out. And we had a Vixen user who wanted to use xschedule to play his show and was having some issues. And again, Scott stepped in and sorted out our file format so that xschedule is able to handle both the Vixen file format and our file format and play their FSCQ files. So that's a whirlwind tour, guys, version 2018. 13 through to 16. There's a bunch of new stuff in there. Obviously, the 3D stuff hasn't quite got there yet. I know Gil's still working very busily on it. It looks great. It's all of the model editing and everything else, the drag and drop. It's all, I've used it. It's really easy to use. I'm pretty happy with it. He's now working on things like camera positions and all that sort of stuff. And hopefully we'll have something by the time the expo comes around in just over a month's time. So cheers. Thanks, guys.